Sometimes the most important witness has 4 legs and a heart full of loyalty. When all evidence points in the wrong direction, only a rescue dog named Duke knows the real truth about what happened that stormy night. The rain hammered against the courthouse windows as Detective Sarah Mitchell walked through the heavy oak doors, her hand resting on the leather leash attached to a massive golden retriever. Duke's amber eyes scanned the crowded hallway, his muscular frame tense despite his calm appearance. Today would determine whether an innocent man spent the rest of his life behind bars, or whether the real killer walked free. Judge Patricia Hendricks looked down from her bench at the unusual sight. In her 23 years of service, she had rarely seen a dog brought into her courtroom during proceedings. But Detective Mitchell had insisted that Duke's presence was crucial to the case, and the defense had agreed. On one side sat Marcus Webb, a 34-year-old construction worker with calloused hands and tired eyes. He had been charged with the brutal murder of elderly Emma Hartwell, found dead in her garden 3 months ago. The evidence seemed overwhelming. His fingerprints on her garden gate. His work truck seen in her neighborhood. No alibi for the time of death. On the other side sat District Attorney Robert Crane, confident and polished. He believed he had an airtight case. A clear-cut murder for robbery gone wrong. The victim's jewelry was missing. Her purse had been rifled through. And Marcus Webb had been struggling financially, everyone knew that. But Detective Mitchell had doubts. Deep, gnawing doubts that kept her awake at night. It all centered on Duke. The golden retriever had been Emma Hartwell's companion for 4 years, ever since she'd adopted him from the county shelter. Emma had rescued Duke from a life of neglect and abuse, nursing him back to health with patience and love. In return, Duke had become her devoted protector. On the night Emma died, Duke had been found 3 blocks away, covered in mud and blood, whimpering by the roadside where a passing motorist had discovered him. The blood had been tested. It was Emma's. Everyone assumed Duke had fled in terror after witnessing his owner's murder. Everyone except Detective Mitchell. She had worked with search and rescue dogs for 15 years before joining the police force. She knew their loyalty, their instincts, their unwavering devotion to their handlers. A dog like Duke didn't run from danger when his beloved owner was threatened. A dog like Duke fought. Detective Mitchell had brought Duke to the courthouse for a specific reason. Emma Hartwell's nephew, Eddie Morrison, was scheduled to testify as a character witness for the prosecution. As the victim's only surviving family member and the beneficiary of her will, his testimony about Emma's relationship with the neighborhood and her concerns about crime would be crucial to establishing motive for robbery. What the prosecution didn't know was that Detective Mitchell had been quietly investigating Eddie Morrison herself. When Eddie Morrison took the witness stand, Duke was lying quietly beside Detective Mitchell's chair in the gallery. The dog had been calm throughout the morning proceedings, barely lifting his head as various witnesses testified. But the moment Eddie began to speak, everything changed. Duke's entire body went rigid. His ears flattened against his head. A low, menacing growl rumbled from deep in his chest, so quiet that only Detective Mitchell could hear it at first. "Mr. Morrison," the prosecutor began, "can you tell us about your aunt's state of mind in the weeks before her death?" Eddie adjusted his tie nervously. She was worried about break-ins in the neighborhood. She mentioned seeing strangers around, people who didn't belong. Duke's growl grew louder. His hackles rose as he stared fixedly at Eddie, his breathing becoming rapid and shallow. Detective Mitchell placed a calming hand on Duke's head, but she could feel the tremor of rage running through the dog's body. Several jurors had noticed the dog's reaction and were glancing curiously between Duke and the witness stand. "Did she ever mention feeling threatened by anyone specifically?" the prosecutor continued. "No, she never. Eddie's voice faltered as he caught sight of Duke. The dog was now standing, his lips pulled back in a silent snarl, every muscle in his body coiled for attack. Judge Hendricks hit her gavel sharply. "Is there a problem with the animal, Detective Mitchell?" Detective Mitchell stood, her mind racing. Duke's reaction was unmistakable, the same traumatic fear response she had seen him display only once before, during their investigation, when she had unknowingly driven past Eddie Morrison's house during a neighborhood canvass. Duke's growl had become audible to the entire courtroom now. The bailiff moved closer, ready to intervene, but Detective Mitchell held up a hand. Judge Hendricks hit her gavel sharply. "Mr. Morrison, you seem distressed. Do you need a moment?" Eddie's voice came out as a whisper. "That dog, it's looking at me like it wants to kill me." The judge studied Eddie's pale face and trembling hands. "Court will recess. Detective Mitchell, please see me in chambers immediately." In the privacy of her chambers, Judge Hendricks listened as Detective Mitchell explained her suspicions about inconsistencies in Eddie Morrison's alibi and the significance of Duke's traumatic reaction. "Your Honor, I believe there may be physical evidence we haven't discovered. I request a search warrant for Mr. Morrison's residence." "Your Honor, I've had doubts about this case from the beginning," Detective Mitchell said earnestly. "In my 15 years working with search and rescue dogs, I've learned to trust their instincts. Dogs don't lie, and they don't forget trauma." Duke's reaction today wasn't random, it was recognition and fear. Meanwhile, an innocent man is about to spend his life in prison while the real killer walks free. We owe it to Emma Hartwell and to justice itself to follow every lead. Judge Hendricks weighed the detective's words carefully before nodding. 20 minutes later, Detective Mitchell had her warrant. As the bailiff approached, Duke lunged forward with a snarl so fierce that Eddie stumbled backward, nearly falling off the witness stand. "Keep that thing away from me!" Eddie shouted, his composure finally cracking completely. The truth was about to come out. But there was more to this story. Much more. 3 months earlier, on a gray October evening, Emma Hartwell had been tending to her prized rose garden when the first drops of rain began to fall. At 73, she was still spry and determined, refusing to let age slow her down. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency among the thorns and blooms. Duke lay nearby on the porch, his golden coat gleaming even in the dim light. He was always close to Emma, rarely letting her out of his sight. The bond between them was deeper than most people understood. Emma had found Duke at the county shelter 4 years ago, a broken and terrified dog who had been severely abused by his previous owners. The shelter workers warned her that he might never fully recover, that the trauma had made him unpredictable and possibly dangerous. But Emma saw something different in those amber eyes. She saw intelligence, loyalty, and a desperate need for love. She took him home that very day. The first few months had been challenging. Duke flinched at sudden movements, refused to eat if anyone was watching, and would hide under furniture during thunderstorms. But Emma was patient. She spoke to him in soft, gentle tones. She never raised her voice or moved too quickly around him. Slowly, Duke began to trust. And as he healed, Emma discovered that Duke was special. He seemed to sense things other dogs couldn't. He would alert her to visitors before they knocked. He would refuse to go on walks if something felt wrong in the neighborhood. He had an uncanny ability to judge people's character within moments of meeting them. "He's got good instincts," Emma would tell her friends. "Better than most humans I know." That instinct had served them well over the years. Duke had barked warnings about a gas leak that could have killed Emma. He had refused to let her answer the door for strangers who turned out to be con artists. He had even guided her safely home during a blackout when she had gotten disoriented. Emma trusted Duke completely. So when her nephew Eddie Morrison started visiting more frequently in the weeks before her death, Emma should have paid attention to Duke's reactions. The dog had never liked Eddie. From the moment Eddie walked through the front door, Duke would retreat to another room. His ears would flatten, and he would watch Eddie with suspicious, wary eyes. If Eddie tried to pet him, Duke would politely but firmly move away. "That dog doesn't like me much," Eddie would joke, but there was something cold in his laugh. Emma dismissed Duke's behavior as normal dog territorialism. Eddie was her late sister's son, family. She had helped raise him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 12. She had paid for his college education, helped him through his divorce, and bailed him out of financial trouble more times than she could count. She loved Eddie like a son. She didn't know that Eddie had gambling debts. Serious ones. The kind that got people hurt if they weren't paid quickly. He owed $40,000 to some very dangerous people, and they had made it clear that his time was running out. Emma's will left everything to Eddie. Her house, her savings, her investments. More than enough to solve all his problems and set him up for life. So you won't believe what happened next. On that rainy October night, he parked his car 3 blocks away and walked to Emma's house through the back alleys, staying in the shadows. He knew her routine. She would be in the garden until dark, then she would come inside for tea and television. He planned to make it look like a robbery gone wrong. What he didn't plan for was Duke. As Eddie crept through the back gate, Duke's head snapped up immediately. The dog's nostrils flared, catching a familiar scent that shouldn't be there. His amber eyes locked onto the shadowy figure moving through the yard. Duke didn't bark. Not yet. He was trying to process what he was seeing. Someone he knew, someone who visited regularly, but someone who was moving wrong. Creeping. Hiding. Someone who felt dangerous. Emma was kneeling by her roses, her back to the house, completely unaware of the approaching threat. The rain was getting heavier, masking the sound of Eddie's footsteps. Duke made his decision. He rose silently from the porch and began moving toward Emma, placing himself between her and Eddie. His muscles were coiled and ready, but he was still trying to understand the situation. Eddie saw the dog moving and cursed under his breath. He had forgotten about Duke. "Hey, Emma," Eddie called out, his voice artificially cheerful. "Didn't expect to see you out here in the rain." Emma looked up, surprised but pleased. "Eddie! What a nice surprise. I was just finishing up here." She started to stand, brushing dirt from her knees. Duke positioned himself at her side, his body tense. "You know, I've been thinking about our conversation last week," Eddie said, moving closer. "About updating your will." Emma frowned slightly. "We didn't have a conversation about my will, dear." Eddie's jaw tightened. This wasn't going according to plan. He had hoped to make this quick and clean, but Emma was too sharp, too aware. "I think you're getting confused, Aunt Emma. You've been forgetting things lately." "I most certainly have not," Emma said firmly, and Duke heard the change in her tone. The dog's ears pricked forward, sensing tension. That's when Eddie pulled out the kitchen knife he had taken from Emma's own drawer. Duke saw the blade flash in the dim light and reacted instantly. For years of love and trust and devotion crystallized into pure protective fury. He launched himself at Eddie with a snarl that came from somewhere primal and fierce. The attack was so sudden and unexpected that Eddie staggered backward, the knife flying from his hand. Duke's teeth found Eddie's arm, biting down hard and tearing through the fabric of his jacket. The dog's claws raked across Eddie's chest, shredding the material and leaving deep scratches on his skin. "Duke, no!" Emma cried out, not understanding what was happening. But Eddie understood perfectly. He grabbed a heavy garden stone and swung it at Duke's head with vicious force. The blow connected with a sickening thud. Duke yelped and released his grip, staggering sideways. Blood trickled from a gash above his right eye, and his legs buckled beneath him. Emma screamed. The sound cut through the rain and darkness like a blade. She finally understood what was happening, saw the knife on the ground, saw the blood on Eddie's torn jacket, saw her beloved Duke struggling to stay conscious. "Eddie, what are you doing?" she whispered, backing away. But Eddie was beyond reasoning now. His plan was ruined. Duke had seen everything. Emma had seen everything. There was no going back. He picked up the knife. "I'm sorry, Aunt Emma. I really am. But I need that money." Emma turned to run, but she was 73 years old and Eddie was 29. He caught her easily. Duke, despite his head injury, despite the blood streaming down his face, despite the dizziness that made the world spin, struggled to his feet. His beloved Emma was in danger. Nothing else mattered. He lunged at Eddie one final time, his teeth finding Eddie's leg, tearing fabric and flesh. But the effort cost Duke everything he had left. The head injury was worse than it appeared. He collapsed beside Emma's rose bushes, his breathing shallow and labored. Eddie kicked him viciously in the ribs, and Duke's world went dark. "Stupid dog," Eddie spat, thinking he had killed him. When it was over, when Emma lay still among her beloved roses, Eddie stood in the rain and tried to think. His jacket was torn beyond repair, shredded by Duke's claws and teeth. Dog hair clung to the fabric, and his own blood mixed with the rain. He looked down at Duke's still form and felt a moment of relief. At least the dog was dead. No witnesses. Eddie quickly staged the scene to look like a robbery gone wrong, scattering Emma's jewelry, dumping out her purse, taking a few small items from the house. Then he drove home as fast as he could, his torn jacket hidden in his garage. He was certain he had left no witnesses behind. He was wrong. Duke wasn't dead. As the rain continued to fall, Duke's eyes fluttered open. Every breath sent pain shooting through his ribs. His head throbbed, and the world kept spinning sickeningly. But he was alive. And Emma. Duke tried to get to Emma, but his legs wouldn't support him. He could smell her blood, could sense that she was beyond help. The knowledge sent a howl of grief through his chest, but he barely had the strength to whimper. He had to get help. Somehow, he had to tell someone what had happened. Using every ounce of strength he had left, Duke began to crawl. Inch by agonizing inch, he dragged himself away from Emma's garden and toward the street. His vision kept blurring, and several times he collapsed completely, certain he couldn't go on. But Emma's voice seemed to whisper in his ear, "Good boy, Duke. Keep going. You're such a good boy." It took him nearly an hour to reach the road 3 blocks away. By then, he was more dead than alive, leaving a trail of blood behind him. He collapsed on the asphalt just as a car's headlights swept over him. The Miller family found Duke that night and rushed him to the emergency veterinary clinic. Dr. Jennifer Walsh worked for 6 hours to save his life, repairing internal injuries and treating the severe concussion. "He's a fighter," she told the Millers. "Most dogs wouldn't have survived what he went through. And the distance he traveled with these injuries, it's remarkable." He was trying to get help. Detective Mitchell returned to Eddie Morrison's house with a search warrant. What she found in his garage changed everything. Hidden beneath a tarp in the corner was Eddie's torn and blood-stained jacket. Forensics would later confirm that the blood belonged to both Emma Hartwell and Eddie Morrison himself. Dog hair from Duke was embedded in the fabric. More damning evidence emerged from Eddie's cell phone records and financial statements. His phone had been turned off for 4 hours on the night of the murder, something he had no explanation for. His gambling debts were even worse than Detective Mitchell had initially discovered, and threatening messages from loan sharks painted a picture of a desperate man running out of time. When Detective Mitchell confronted Eddie with the evidence, his composure crumbled completely. "I never meant for it to go that far," he said, his hands shaking. "I just needed the money. I was going to make it quick, painless. But that damn dog." He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "That damn dog loved her," Detective Mitchell said quietly. "He was protecting her. Like he was supposed to. And when you left him for dead, he crawled 3 blocks to get help. He never gave up on getting justice for Emma." Eddie Morrison was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Marcus Webb was released and cleared of all charges. The town of Millfield struggled to understand how they had gotten it so wrong, how they had been so quick to judge an innocent man. But Detective Mitchell understood. "People see what they expect to see," she explained to the local newspaper. They expected the working-class guy with financial problems to be guilty. They didn't expect the well-dressed nephew who stood to inherit millions. Sometimes the truth isn't what seems obvious. Sometimes you have to listen to witnesses who can't speak for themselves.